Hey everyone, Alan Messia here, and welcome back to The Business of You. This is episode 3, Budgeting Part 2. Last week's episode, we talked about putting together your first basic budget, as well as identifying your discretionary and necessary expenses. We also touched on the 50-30-20 rule, which states that no more than 50% of your income should go to necessary expenses, no more than 30% to discretionary, and at least 20% to savings and debt. If you haven't had a chance to put together that basic budget, go back to episode 2 and review that video before you start here. So today we're going to dive a little bit further into the 50-30-20 rule, review a sample budget, and make adjustments to see if there's any discretionary expenses that can be cut. We're going to talk about some tips on how to use the budget and strategies on how to stick to it. So let's dive in. So let's take a look at our sample client. Let's say the client is a content creator and has a side hustle with Uber. They're bringing in about $3,200 a month. Their personal monthly expenses are $1,030 for housing, $490 for transportation, health insurance is about $200 a month, $900 for groceries, restaurants, and bars, $320 for personal care, $130 for general entertainment, $130 for debt, and $0 to savings. This client has designated housing, transportation, health insurance, and groceries out of their food budget as necessary expenses. Let's take a look at this chart and see how their budget is allocated using the 50-30-20 rule. Their total necessary expenses are about $2,020 a month, or 63% of their income. 33% of this client's income goes to discretionary expenses, and that includes restaurants and bars from the food category. And only 4% of their income is going towards savings and debt. We're going to have to assume some credit card debt. So as you can see, we need to make some changes to this budget and help this client get back on track. It might be tough to make changes to their necessary expenses since this client lives in LA with roommates and still pays $900 a month. So what else can we do? Well, if the client can increase their net take home by $100 a week, maybe by driving Uber a few more hours a week, this relatively small increase can get their percentages into the right range. Their necessary expenses are now 56% of their total income, which is acceptable. Their discretionary expenses are 29%, and we've been applying that $400 towards savings and debt to bring that ratio up to 15%. Now let's see if we can take it a step further and cut some of their spending in restaurants and bars. By cutting a mere $44 a week out of this category, we can bring their discretionary expenses down to 24% and reallocate to savings and debt to bring it up to 20%. Again, we're not talking about big changes here. By being aware of how your money is being allocated within these categories, you can create simple changes that will have benefits long term. So now that you've made some adjustments to your budget, let's look at some tips on how to use it. My number one suggestion for using your budget successfully is to stick to cash for at least 3 months. Stop using credit cards. This simple tip can control your overspending and will increase your chance of success. I'm not suggesting you get rid of your credit cards, but simply not using them can keep you on track. Tip number 2, look at the budget on a daily basis and update your actuals as you spend. Write down your spending in a notebook or on a different tab in your budget spreadsheet. This small commitment will allow you to see patterns in your spending and see how much you have left to spend in each category. It will also help you create a habit necessary to stick to a budget. Tip number 3, adjust your budget on a monthly basis. Set aside about an hour at the end of each month to review your progress. This will help you make a positive adjustment for the following month, making sure your budget remains realistic. Tip number 4, write down 3 goals you hope to achieve by setting this budget. You can set them up as a daily reminder on your phone, write them down on a piece of paper, or put them somewhere where you'll see them daily. This will be a great motivation to keep on track. For example, a great goal would be to save $1,000 for an emergency fund or pay down your debt within 6 months. Tip number 5, identify your emotional triggers to spending. No matter which emotion drives you, overspending puts your budget in jeopardy. Look at the feelings that have caused you in the past to overspend and figure out ways to pause your spending at those times so you can make conscious financial choices. If you can trace your overspending back to some emotions you felt in the past, you've already identified your awareness, and this is the first step towards breaking those negative habits. So look for other ways to deal with your emotions, like speaking to a friend or parents, or replacing spending habits with something more productive. Okay, so let's talk about a strategy to stick to your budget. I recommend my clients have at least 3 bank accounts. The first account is for bill pay, the second is for spending, and the third is for savings. To implement this system, you'll need to go back and look at your expenses and determine which are fixed and which are variable. Fixed expenses are those that you're spending the same amount every month, such as your rent or car payment. Variable expenses fluctuate every month, such as your gas for your car, lunches, or personal care. As soon as you get paid, move an allocated amount into each of the 3 accounts. The bill pay account should have enough money to cover all your fixed expenses for the month, including your planned debt payments. The spending account will have a debit card attached and should have just enough for you to spend on your discretionary or variable expenses. I recommend that you move the money over into this account weekly so you can control overspending. Finally, in the savings account, you can deposit an exact amount you want to save. Do this as soon as you get paid so that you pay yourself first. All right, so that's gonna wrap up this week's episode. I hope these 2 budgeting episodes have given you a lot to think about and a platform for a strong financial future. Next week, we're gonna cover debt. We'll cover how to rate your debt, strategies on repayment, and some tips to stay on track as you strive towards a debt-free life. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates and financial tips. And I'll see you next week on The Business of You.